Welcome to our pod, and by that I mean on Wednesdays we read. I'm Hannah.
I'm Laura.
And we are two best friends who do a deep dive into a new book series, one book at a time. And sometimes we're starting on like January 1st for the new year with
It's
a
a new
brand
year.
new series because we are breaking into the Broken Earth trilogy. Welcome
Breaking the
to Breaking the Earth. Welcome to season 7, y'all.
I'm excited for this one.
I know, me too. So for those
One
who,
of my favorites.
a lot of people jump into our new seasons when they want to start a new book. So we are two best friends. We do a deep dive. We do plot episodes and then themes and characters to wrap it up. So we do a deep dive into a new book series. It's pretty lightweight. You only have to read one book a month usually. And we have
Mhm.
some bonus content in between. So,
A read along a series of sorts.
yeah.
And we don't do chapter by chapter, but we have this one broken into thirds. So if you're
Yes.
interested in the 5th season and the Broken Earth trilogy by N.K. Jemisin, you're in the right place.
You are in the right spot and you're listening to the correct season, so congratulations. But before we do our deep dive into the new book series, we ask each other, Laura, what are you reading, watching, and or enjoying right now?
So I recently watched Reservation Dogs.
Oh, is that
Binged.
good? I've
It is
wanted to watch
good.
it.
It's really
Okay.
good. I
Okay.
binged all 3 seasons. There's only 3 seasons available. I
Yeah.
think it's done now.
Okay.
Um, I really liked it. Um, the character Bev, she was on Rutherford Falls on
Okay.
Peacock, and I really liked. I think her name is Jaina, if I'm remembering right. Jaina Schmieding, maybe. Uh, but she is a writer and creator of Rutherford Falls, which is a story of a small town that has a lot of native indigenous people there, and they have like a casino and all these different politics that are at play within that town. But anyways, Reservation Dogs is primarily focused on these teenagers within a reservation in Oklahoma, and it starts off being kind of like quirky and fun, but then it gets so deep. And
Okay.
I really loved it, and I love all the different dynamics and the ways that this show shows what life is like for Indigenous people and how complex and really just filled with trauma their
Hmm.
lives are. And I really think that despite the displaying those things, there's so much heart in this show, and I thought that the actors did a phenomenal job. There's the teenage actors too are really great, and there's several moments in this show that are just really emotional. I think if you're going to watch it, maybe look into trigger warnings for some of the episodes because they
Okay.
do handle things in terms of like the boarding schools that were across the United States and Canada, where Indigenous people were
Right.
horribly brutalized.
Yeah.
And so be sure to look into that. But I think the show does a great job highlighting what life is like for people, Indigenous people in the United States, and specifically on reservations. And really some great acting performances. The actor who portrays Willie Jack, I think, is so cute and so fun. And I really thought that she did a great job with all of her like she has to have a lot of like monologues that are heartfelt, it seemed like, and she does a great job with that. So I really just like that series in general, and there's a lot of complexities within each episode, and I think there's sometimes when the show even gets a little complex in itself where it starts to dig a little deeper into like the backgrounds of certain characters in a way that could be a little confusing, but then you start to realize that
Okay.
they had intended to develop the characters in this way from the beginning, and they were trying to give more background info and kind of deepen our experience as viewers to learn more about the society and the cast of characters as a whole and how they're all interconnected. And I thought it was just
Right.
very smart to do that. But this is a Taika Waititi uh, creation as well.
Mm, so it's gonna
So
be good.
yeah, I think you can pick up on some of those vibes there. But it's a really great show. I would highly recommend it. Like once I started watching it, I was just like, I need the next one. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah,
And
it's
then
been one that I've wanted to watch so badly, and then I think I keep like forgetting to start it. So I need to get on that if you liked it so much. So
yeah, I think it's good. And there are like funny moments in it too. I just think that overall the like themes are very like deep.
Mm-hmm.
So overall, don't know that I would necessarily call it a comedy, but it might be classified as a comedy, similar to like the way The Bear is. But
Okay. Yeah, like how we've been getting into like this is totally a comedy, and you're like, is it though?
but is it?
Like,
Because that episode made me really emotional.
yeah.
So, and I
Okay.
get it that comedies can do that, but this one I feel like in particular feels a little bit darker and heavier at times than a
Yeah.
comedy usually feels. I guess when I feel like, oh, this is a comedy series, I'm looking for something that's maybe more directly in my face comedy series
Yes.
like Parks and Rec.
The
But
dark comedy of it all, where it's like, oh yeah, you laughed twice, so
yeah,
we're gonna say it's a comedy because it's absurdist in a weird, dark way. Got it.
yeah, kind of along those lines. So yeah, that's what we're dealing with there. And then as far as reading, I started reading last year because we are technically in the new year now.
Oh my gosh.
But I
Happy
started reading,
2025, guys.
yes, happy 2025. Welcome to the new year.
uh,
Let's think that's okay. Um, but I started reading Vinland Saga by Makoto
mm-hmm.
Yurimaka. I think that's who it is. Yurimaka or Yurimata. I am not remembering. I feel bad because I've been loving this series, so I should remember who
Laura's been
it's
obsessed with this
by.
series, so
Yeah, that's unfortunate that I don't. Yukimura. I'm terrible. Makoto Yukimura is the creator of Vinland Saga. It's such a good series, Hannah. So, like, I've read 8 books, and I think that they're broken into volumes as far as like one, part two. And so each book that I've been reading is technically 2 volumes because they're like
okay.
400 pages in the books that I got from the library. And I was like, these can't be individual volumes. So it's a little confusing because I've been trying. My friend online recommended that I read Vinland Saga when I was like, yeah, I'm having a hard time reading right now. Like, I'm in the middle of a reading slump. Everything kind of stinks. And I just
Yeah.
don't feel like reading. He was like, you should read Vinland Saga. I think that will help. And he was right. And so he's been asking me like about my progress and everything because he read the books obviously and watched the show. So he's been kind of following along. He's been somebody to talk to. And also I think he's been kind of laughing at me as I've tried to predict things that will happen with the series since he knows
Fun.
what happens. Um,
Exactly.
which is kind of funny. But it's a super deep story about a young man who grows up in like the Nordic countries, and his dad had left his like previously dark life as like a Viking warrior, and he follows his dad on a mission when his dad is like found after found in hiding,
Okay.
and ends up his dad is tragically killed, and so our hero Thorfinn, who is just a young boy, basically dedicates his life in the first several books of the series to trying to avenge his father.
Mm-hmm.
And he's focused on killing his father's killer, Askeladd, who is this just really smart and strong and manipulative and also political genius type figure who is a fascinating character, really, when it comes down to it. Like, all the character work in this is very well done, but it's an interesting shift then because at the end of this first arc, I think people describe Vinland Saga as being broken into arcs, but at the end of this arc, I'm just going to spoil it here. The series been out for a while, but Thorfinn loses his whole purpose in life, and I
Mm-hmm.
thought that that was so interesting to portray it in such a way because when I was reading this, like I did not expect some of these things to happen because I'm like, oh, this is just going to be about his quest to avenge his father, blah blah blah. And at the end of that first arc, when it's revealed that like, nope, we're done with that, I was like, oh well, this is taking a different turn that I did not
Yeah.
expect. But I also just really appreciated the way that the author portrayed like all the complexities of trying to basically be a pacifist in a world that does not want pacifism. Like how the world is incredibly unfair and how slavery exists and how extreme brutalization of certain groups of people exists and that those people claim to have a higher purpose and claim that they're doing good but doing good looks very different for different groups of people.
Right.
And I was like, this is incredibly deep for a manga. There's been many times throughout the series so far, the 8 books that I have read, that I've been like very emotional. But the first arc, I think, is the first 4 books of the series, I think, are really interesting to me just from the standpoint of the setup and shift for the series. And so I thought the
Okay.
author did a great job with that. So now I'm waiting for, I'll talk about the next 4 in the next episode, but I'm waiting right now for books 9 through 13, I think, because that's all that's out. And the series is still ongoing. I think that there's going to be an additional one that comes out this year, and then maybe
Mm.
another one next year. The author has kind of left it a little open as to when the series is going to be completed, but fairly soon, it sounds like.
Okay.
I also just really appreciate the series from the standpoint of at like the end of each of the books, the author, this is common in mangas, but the author writes a little message to readers, and this author is very much like sharing his experience of being a father and what fatherhood looks like for him and how his relationship with his own father has shaped his own view of fatherhood and parenthood. And
Okay.
even though they're just like little like short 1 to 2 page excerpts at the end, I'm like, okay, I love that you're including this, giving us this glimpse into how your view of parenthood has shaped your writing and this story itself. And I think that that's kind of a neat look into like the behind the scenes of it all. And I really appreciate that because sometimes when I'm reading certain mangas, you just get like that little excerpt at the end where it's just like, yeah, so I haven't been doing too much lately, been watching lots of TV and eating pizza. So I'll see you in the next volume. But this, I'm like, it's so deep that the author is really questioning his own role as a parent and how his relationship with his father really shaped him and who he became and how he's worried about the same thing with his own kids. I'm like, that's so interesting. And then he's basically just like, yeah, it's another book about fathers and sons. That's
Oh,
just what
good.
we needed. But but it makes me laugh, and I really just appreciate that authors take the time to kind of give you a glimpse into their thought processes sometimes.
Yeah.
And I think that it adds a lot to this series in particular that's at the end of these books. But Hannah, I'm going to leave it at that. So, what have you
Okay.
been reading, watching,
Well, I
and or
do know that
enjoying?
Laura has been enjoying Vinland Saga because she shares it on social media. She's been texting me, so that really means that she loves something. So,
It's been
um,
like the only thing that I've been consuming for a while because, it's been a difficult
yeah.
year and the last quarter of the year was rough. And then it
Yeah.
jumped right into holidays. So, I've been having a
Oh,
hard time getting to
I
anything
know.
else.
I can't believe it's already 2025. I feel like there's like a weird blueness in the air of like, oh, this year is ending and yeah, it'll be a rough
Like,
year.
this is what happened. So,
So, for watching, because it was the end of the year, and I do feel like I got married in 2024, there was so much to do, and then I went like straight into honeymoon phase and holidays. I kind of had like this past weekend was my first weekend at home that I didn't have anything going on in so long. So, in like the entire month of December. So, I disassociated and I turned on BritBox and I did what Hannah did best, which was watch an entire, like, for some reason, BritBox was like, do you want to watch Hercule Poirot marathon live with like tons of other
absolutely.
people? And I was like, yeah, I do. Thank you. And so I turned it on and just watched it all day Saturday. And my
Who
husband
is
was like,
portraying Poirot?
oh, it's like it's the BBC version. So, oh, jeez, what's his name? Um, yeah, it's like the Masterpiece Theater, Hercule Poirot. It's played by David Suchet.
Okay.
This
Let's look
was
him up.
like uh it's definitely like the BBC 1989 through 2013
Okay.
miniseries of Hercule Poirot. And these are wild. Like I went to bed and my husband was like, "What was your favorite one?" And I was like, "I don't know. They all ran together." And he was like, "Well, did you have any favorites?" And I was like, "They had a lot of mysteries that were suddenly like, do you want to know this one character? Who was this person? They're actually not that person,
But they're not.
but they're not." And that happened at least 3 times, which is a lot. And honestly, looking and seeing like, oh, this was on for like well over a decade, fair enough. Like in a decade, you're going to have the same ones. But if you're watching them back to back to back, you're like, yeah, I'm not shocked because like that was happening quite often, that it was
I feel
someone
like
pretending
Agatha
to be
Christie
someone they
is
were not.
incredibly formulaic.
Yeah, and I will say that like watching these, I don't know that much about Hercule Poirot. Like I turned this on. I was a little bit sick this weekend. I turned it on during Murder on the Orient Express, and I was able to fall asleep because I was like, I know how this
Hmm.
one ends. I saw the
Hmm.
movie with Kenneth Branagh as Hercule
Yeah,
Poirot, and so I was like, okay, I'm just gonna fall asleep during
which I
this
like him
one.
as Pogo.
It also had the guy who was in The Detectoress with the worst Southern um, accent I've ever heard.
Hmm.
And I was like, well, obviously this is a BBC. Like, I can't hold him to an impossible standard, but it was Toby Jones, and he like kept tipping out of a Southern accent into just an American accent. And I was like, I understand that if you're like a British star doing
Hmm.
this, you're like, well, it's an American accent. And I'm like, yeah, but if you're doing Southern and you break out into like a common colloquial American accent, it's gonna like pull me right out of it and be like, what's going on? Um, but besides that, they were all just a little bit like it washed over me really well, but it was a certain standard of mystery that I've kind of gone away from, which is the Hercule Poirot is one of the like smartest people you're ever going to meet. And every mystery, there's a background story that we are not privy to
Hmm.
at all, but he was able to deduce it by just glancing at like 5-second clips. And I'm like,
I mean, that sounds about right.
yeah. And I was like, well, this is very like Sherlock Holmes. Like, I do think it's funny because this show often was just every British person being like, "Oh, you're French, gross," and just like walking
I
away.
th
And I was
yeah,
like,
I
"Oh,
think it is
okay."
mentioned. Maybe he's not French. I think he's
He's
Belgian.
he's
And
Belgian, but
okay,
everyone like thinks he's French, and they're like, "Ugh,
yeah,
a French man," and they
it
like,
is mentioned a lot though in like the books because every single book that I've read a lot of the Poirot books, but it's like every single one, it's like there's a build up where we get he's the only one who can solve the case and he's from Belgium and he's done all these things and everyone's like, "Wow, are you from Belgium? Have you done all these things?"
I, and every time he walks in, they're like, "Oh, Hercule Poirot is here." Oh no.
Yeah, they're all
Um,
like shocked every time. Yeah, that sounds very much like the book, so they're being faithful.
Yes, they are being faithful, and it's just very funny to like read these and be or like watch this and like know a little bit of Agatha Christie, but not much. Where I'm like, oh, this is
Hmm.
just like her version of Sherlock Holmes, it feels like in some ways. But she also has like a character who I think is supposed to be a self-insert character, Miss Felicity Lemon. Um, no, wait, it's not her. It's the writer. I forget who plays the writer, but there's like a writer who's like in some of these, and
Hmm.
Hercule Poirot is always like,
Yeah.
ma'am, you're such an idiot. And I'm like, excuse you, why are you being so mean to this woman? I also enjoyed that he talks about himself in the third person and people comment on how annoying it is, where they're like, why do you refer to yourself in the third person? And his reasoning is, well, I have to put some distance between myself and myself because I'm so amazing. And I
Yeah.
was like,
That
okay,
it
this
fits.
is
Yeah.
interesting. Um, with your tiny little mustache and how amazing you think you are. But
But he
it was a
is.
wild time. Oh, Ariadne Oliver, that's who the self is
Yep.
insert character is.
Yep.
And that feels very much like Agatha Christie was like, I'm going to put myself in here, but I'm also going to be kind of
But yep.
mean to myself.
I have a lot of
Um,
connections. I'm a writer who's in the know and just
yeah,
conveniently in all the right places. These homes where
exactly.
people are being murdered, where people are
Oh my
escaping.
gosh. And people
Insane
do
asylums.
people do be getting murdered and do be marrying their cousins a lot in these.
Oh
And I
yeah.
was like, well, like, okay, I guess. But yeah, it was an enjoyable Saturday where I played some Stardew Valley and I just watched a whole bunch of Hercule Poirot. The other funny part of this like live watching, because like live watching never makes sense, was I got to see like the final episodes, like they were like the final seasons, like season 12. And then they just bounced back to season 10. And I was like, that's not far back enough. Like, usually you do a full circle where you're like, oh, we're starting at episode one. But they were like, no, 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 we're going to start back at episode season 10. And I was like, I guess if you want to. So I watched those and I didn't really like Hercule very much, I will say. He rubbed me the wrong way. But it was an enjoyable time and it was British cozy murders, which is right up
Yeah.
my alley. So I
It sounds
will
like perfect TV show for you.
exactly. And it just washed right over me. And if you ask me about any of the murder scenes,
Kind
I
of why
could
I
not tell
like
you.
those books because I feel like it's just like popcorn type books where I'm like, I know what's gonna happen. Nothing's gonna shock me that much.
Right. Guess what? Someone is pretending to be someone else.
Yep.
You'll never see it coming. My favorite is when he was like, "Oh, you remember that aunt who died in an earlier scene? That was really you." And then you went on to murder the real one. And I was like, I guess. Like, and then for what I haven't been watching too much. I did watch Dog and Robot. It's an animated movie. It's a very cute animated movie about like this dog who's really lonely, and so he buys a robot friend, and they
Mhm.
just get to spend all this time together until accidentally Robot falls asleep at the beach and he's rusted and he can't move.
Oh,
And Dog
that's
tries
sad.
to like go to get him, but the following day the beach is closed, and so like they have to spend an entire like winter without each other, and it's called oh sorry it's called Robot Dreams.
Robot
And
Dreams. Where's that streaming?
I don't know where it's streaming. I saw it on an airplane.
Oh, okay.
um and I really liked it, although the end made me like really sad. There are certain moments in time where I realize like, oh, I'm getting older because certain movies like make me mad when they're that sentimental, where I'm
Oh.
like, you can have more than one friend. You can't like you can still have more than one friend. It's okay. Like, and I get the sense of like, oh, this is an artist who wants to be like melancholic and like things like that. I'm
Hmm.
like, yeah, but the reality is you can have more than one friend. And I get really upset. I'm like, oh, I'm getting older. And like like it hurts me more. And so I have this like
I can tell that we're
very
very different because I would watch that and be like, your only friend is going to die.
I was like, you can have more than one friend. It's fine. And it made me very mad at the movie, but it was very good. It was very well done. I really liked the animation in it. I thought the story was very beautiful. And like, there's not that much like, there were so many parts that like you think something's happening and then you get like pulled back out and you're like, oh my gosh. And so they did a very effective job. And it's called a tragic comedy, which goes back to our comedies of like, oh,
Hmm.
sad things that make you laugh a couple times. So
I always wonder how people like go about classifying these things. Like, is it the creators that have to figure out like this is a comedy or this is a dark comedy or this is whatever? I think that'd be a hard job.
I know, but it was nominated for an Academy Award last year. So
Okay.
go watch it. It's an interesting one. It's very sentimental and sad at the end. So just be warned. If you're old, you might get mad at it, like I did.
Or
Uh,
just be sad.
or just be, I guess. And then for reading, I read The Pairing by Casey McQuiston. This is my third Casey McQuiston novel, and I thought it was incredibly cute. So this is about two bisexual exes who accidentally book the same European food and wine tour, and they challenge each other. Like they, you find out like they were best friends growing up, and then they were together for a few years, and broke up on the way to this trip originally. And then 3 years later, they book the trip when it's like at the end of like, well, you have to book the trip now or else you lose your deposit type thing because they were able to rebook at some point. And they run into each other. And like, it's about them trying to find a way back into friendship with each other and finding out like what happened and the miscommunications that happened after it was 4 years that they broke up that happened 4 years earlier, and just like the difficulties they had with like being together and things like that. And it is very funny because they also challenge each other to a hookup competition to like kind of ease the pain of
Okay.
like becoming friends again. So they're like, oh, let's hook up with as many people as we can. And I would say
I
like
feel like that would be so hurtful.
I, I know it was like very I think I liked this book a lot. I like that Casey McQuiston was getting into like more queer relationships that she hasn't dived into as much before, where
Mm-hmm.
like lots of gay couples, and not like shaming anyone, everyone gets to have the type of relationship they want, but like a lot of queer couples are a little bit more like sexually open than other couples.
Okay.
Not to like paint with a broad brush, but it does happen quite often. And like I've had friends
Okay.
who
I
have
guess
been
I didn't
like
realize that.
I've had friends who like will sometimes invite a third into their relationship or like have
Okay.
threesomes or they'll have more of an open relationship. And that was very much the energy of this book where it was like,
Okay.
yeah, we liked doing threesomes. We liked being with other people and like that turned us on. And I was like, this is a very sex positive book.
Okay.
It talked about pegging. It talked about a lot of like sex positive stuff that I was very happy to see in a queer romance book because I feel like a lot of the criticism that comes out of queer romances is that it's a very straight type of romance
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
queer romance like people who read it and want that type of energy can't find it in certain books that are often written by white women who kind of put
Who
more of
are
this
like
right.
me and are like, oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, I didn't realize people have open relationships. And I didn't realize it until my friends told me, and it was like not a big deal, and you're like, oh,
Hmm.
okay, that makes sense. You like
Hmm.
doing that. Why would you not do it just because you're with someone?
Hmm.
If you guys are perfectly
I
in
would say if all
agreement on it,
parties are
if all
okay with
parties
it.
are consenting, who cares? And I really liked this book. I thought some of the miscommunications were a little bit silly. Again, like sometimes when I read about friends to lovers, I'm like, well, you guys should be more open with each other and have a conversation. Cause like if you love and appreciate each other, there are certain things that I think I appreciate more in adulthood. Like there's an episode of Friends where Rachel admits that she loves Ross and she's like, I love you. And she was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I just told you. Like, that sounds ridiculous. And he was like, no, like, I don't feel the same, but like, it's nice to feel loved and I appreciate you telling me. And I was like, that feels like more adult in certain ways that like these are people who are like, I'm in love with them, but I can't say it. I'm like, well, you could have a conversation with each
Yeah, and it,
other.
it does feel like for a situation where it's like they're best friends, supposedly, that why wouldn't
Yeah,
they be more
right.
communicative? But I get what you're saying.
And yeah, and so that always frustrates me, but I did appreciate this book. I thought it was very cute. I
And what a
read it when
slam that Ross is a better communicator.
I
Wow.
know, I mean that in that one instance he was a better communicator. He was the worst
I've been
communicator
rewatching
and
Friends and
oh, it's so rough as an
I'm just like,
adult.
I can't stand Ross.
I can't stand Ross, but I also had huge issues. Like even on my rewatch, I have a lot of issues with the way they portrayed Susan because Susan is
Yeah,
portrayed awfully. And Ross is often portrayed as the villain in those storylines when I'm like, well, I do think it's inappropriate that like
tried way too hard to make Ross the main character and to try
in the
and get us
beginning,
on his
yeah.
side, and it does not work out.
I know. But like even like I remember the storyline of Susan and Carol being like, well, we're gonna give the baby both of our last names. I'm like, well, that's inappropriate when like the dad is involved. Like, and you
Hmm.
guys didn't think to like talk to him about this. This is very strange. Um, but that's neither here nor there. So, yeah, that was a fun book. It was a fun romance. I like that Casey McQuiston's getting into a little bit more, active queer relationships because I feel like
Sure.
like Red,
Not
White,
just
and
the
Royal
build
Blue
up.
was, yeah, and Red, White, and Royal Blue was just Red, White, and Royal Blue. It's like Prince Harry
I
fan
haven't read that
fiction.
one yet, but I read One Last Stop and I liked that one.
I liked One Last Stop as well, except the sex scene on the train always pulled me right out, where I was like, you could tell me this was the cleanest place ever, and it is still sex on a subway
Yeah,
train.
seems gross.
I don't trust you.
What if
Um,
I told you it was out of time?
yeah, I mean, that's fine, but it's still a subway station. Like, it's a
Yes.
subway train.
Agreed.
You can't
Agreed.
convince
There
me
could have
that
been a
that's
better place.
there could have been any type of place like like you. So anyway, neither here nor there. And then I also listened to the second in the duology, Rebecca Ross's Letters of Enchantment, Ruthless Vows. This book was really good. I think I liked it better than the first book.
A lot
It's
of
like
people
a
talk about Rebecca Ross, so I'm curious.
yeah, so this is like a YA romantasy, where in the first book, like it's these two people who are like going against each other for the same job in a like newspaper place, kind of His Girl Friday-esque. And the girl, her brother is met like in a war and he's like off at war. And so she starts typing him letters on this typewriter and pushing them under her door, and then they disappear. And through some type of magic, it's going to her rival's door, and they start writing letters to one another. And he knows who she is, but she doesn't know who he is, a la Shop Around the Corner. So lots of different like motifs in this. And then like she ends up going into the war. He follows her because he falls in love with her. And in the second book, it kind of follows. What I really liked about this book was the first book felt like a lot of build up to the actual fantasy element. Like there was always like a fantastical magical realism because they're typing to each other through this like magic. However they do it, you find out in the book. I won't reveal it, but like that was really the only magic. And then there were some elements of like gods who existed in
Hmm.
England. And in the second book, like it those become front and center where you have this like goddess who had sung her husband who forced her into a marriage into a deep sleep for years and years and years, and he awakened, and that's what's happening in the war, and it becomes like way more fantastical. And I really enjoyed that a lot. I thought it did a better job where like in the original one I was like, well, this just feels like I'm reading a YA romance, which I'm here for any time of the day. But like it was much more fun to read about like the history and kind of see Rebecca Ross actually get to cook in her fantasy element because I thought she really did an effective job creating this world and like digging deeper. Uh, so yeah, and I will say between book one and two, I was really confused about the brother storyline. And book
Hmm.
two, I was like, oh, this is what you were telling me. Okay, thank you. I had no idea what happened to him in the last book. So there's some confusingness, but you and I have talked about this a lot with YA, where like you
Yeah,
kind of
it's
have
a
to be
faster
on
pace and you have
board.
to
Yeah.
take yourself out of it a little bit.
Yeah, where I was like, oh, thank you for telling me what happened in the last book. Because if you
Yeah.
had quizzed me on it, I wouldn't have known.
Hannah, how do
Uh,
you feel about like books having a section at the very beginning where it says, in the last book, this happened,
I
before the plot actually begins of the second book?
I think that that's helpful and more books should have it. Let me have a little Cliff
Same.
Notes 5 pager that we've talked about this with He Who Drowned the World after She Who Became the Sun because you have not
Hmm.
read the second book yet. And I was like, oh, the
Correct.
second book starts with that. And at first I was like, I don't need this. And I read like 2 chapters and I was like, no, I do very much need this. And I like
Brian
read what
Cahill also
happened.
did that for his the Bound and the Broken series, and I think that it's a good idea. I'm
It's
sorry, but when
so
you have books
helpful.
that large and with that many in a series and so much going on, it really is helpful to have that refresher. I know people were like having some pushback on this has been like kind of a hot topic on book community socials right now where people are like, we don't want that. We don't need that. And I'm like, you know what? I kind of need that. And I almost prefer it a little bit if there's just like a rundown of what happened in the previous book, because a lot of
Also,
times I don't go immediately into the next book. And
that's the
also,
thing.
I get more annoyed with like an entire chapter where the main character is like contemplative of like, well, you see, back a few months ago when I was involved in that war and I
Uh,
lost my girlfriend tragically when I was fighting on
a
Dragonback.
la Jim Butcher and Harry
Yeah,
Dresden, where Harry Dresden's like, look, I'm a wizard, and you may
right.
not know this, but I'm in the phone book. And you're like, I do know this
Exactly.
actually, because I'm reading these back to back to back. And so now I feel like I'm stupid. But if you gave
Yes.
me like a little, like, hey, here's the breakdown of the last like
You
book,
have
I
the
would be
option to
like,
skip it.
right, exactly. And you don't need to remember. And it's just like a little, here's what
Yep.
you missed on Glee, if you will.
I actually really like the idea of those like
I
little
know.
nuggets at the beginning where you get the rundown.
I'm on board. Let's do it. Let's have those. Please do, because sometimes it's helpful context. And I do feel
Yes.
like the people who don't like it are often the people who are binging books and going from one to the next.
Yes, that's exactly it. They don't want that because they're like, this is pointless paper. You should have added more book.
But also, like, you don't need to read it. That's the whole point.
Exactly. You can skip right over it and just jump into the series again. That's why I'm like, I guess for me, I find it to be helpful because there are very few series where I find myself going straight from one into the next.
Yeah,
That
never
rarely happens for
happens.
me.
Yeah.
Rarely.
It
Actually, this
happens
series
on
that we're
this
covering.
particular podcast. That's the only time I go back to back.
Well, in this series, I have read the fifth season, the
Hmm.
Broken Earth trilogy before. I jumped immediately into the second book after
Yes, you
reading the
did.
first one. So this is the rare series where that has happened for me outside of things that we are specifically covering for the podcast, where I jumped
Yes.
immediately in without another book in between. But I feel
Hmm.
like sometimes it's nice to have those books in between to kind of give you a little breather
Yes.
because I feel like you can get burnout on series a lot easier
Yes.
if you just keep, especially long ones, if you just keep going from one to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next.
New listeners, go back and listen to all of our Wheel of Time episodes to hear us slowly go insane over the course of
Not that
14
we're thinking of
novels.
a particular series, but
But
don't
if you
read
thought about it,
14,000 pages in one go.
don't do it back to back to back, because at some point, a year in, you're going to go, what if we just did a month where we didn't do that? And we both said, yeah, that, we're going to do that.
I was thinking about it the other day because like somebody was talking about the Wheel of Time and I was like, you know what? I feel bad for a lot of my criticisms because I'm like, I think I was just getting so burnt out on covering this series that I wanted to read some other stuff that got a little harsh.
Well, I do think I mean, yes, we were very harsh. And I recently was like, maybe I could do a reread of that slowly, like the audiobook version, not like read
Yeah,
it with
the
my
audiobooks are
eyeballs.
the bomb.
Yeah, the audiobooks are great. So I was like, maybe I could reread the audiobooks because like people do that with the Wheel of Time and it might be fun to go
Hmm.
back at my own pace. And I was like,
Yes.
yeah, I think I would enjoy that more because by
Yes.
like book 14, a lot of the episodes were like Laura being like, I am so angry, and me being like,
Yes.
I have to be the voice of reason. So I can't get mad. So I have to be like, I liked this part.
Well,
And
and you
like,
just get to, I know I was just getting to the point where like any little like slight problem, I was like, this is ridiculous to me by this
yes.
point that this continues to happen. And so then I was just
Perrin
like
continues searching
infuriated.
for Fael. Like that's hard to read back to
Honestly,
back.
so many things involving Fael were incredibly frustrating. And when you just kept getting more issues with her, it was like, I'm over it. I'm done.
I don't care. Like I wish he had picked the other one.
Right.
Like
So
this
yeah,
is
I
ridiculous.
do think it's helpful to I mean, maybe not all people will agree with this. A lot of people do like to binge series. But
Yes.
I do think it's helpful for the people who don't like to binge series, like you and I, that there is a little section at the beginning that kind of tells you, here's what you missed on Glee.
Right. I think that's very helpful. And then next week I'll go into my hate read of a book that Laura has already heard about. So
Yay!
a
Hate read.
little a little look into what next week will bring. But Laura,
Love a good hate read.
well, I'm going to preface this with we're about to dive in, but this is the first season that Laura will be covering the plot, everyone. I am a
Yeah, we're
first-time
covering the
reader.
first 151 pages, and I posted
Yes.
on Blue Sky that I have 160 pages of notes to cover the first 150 pages.
Look,
Will that be enough?
I have very few notes, but I have tabs
Oh, good.
because I am just here to experience and to
You're
talk with
just along
Laura
for the
about the
ride.
things I loved, and to break in a little bit
It
from
was
time
kind of
to
nice
time.
on this. It's been kind of nice on this reread because I have already read the paperbacks last year and then I
Hmm.
got the audiobooks and I re-listened to them. They're like very comforting audiobooks. So this is now a situation where I'm reading the paperback and listening. I'm doing the full immersive experience and I'm
Oh,
taking notes. So I'm catching so many things that
that you missed
I've
before,
never
I'm
caught
sure.
before.
Yeah, of course.
And
I
I
think
do
that
think
that
this
makes
is one of those
sense.
series that you definitely can pick up on new things each time you read it. But let's begin at the end of the world, shall we?
Shall we begin at the end of the world? What a great prologue. I know you're about to tell me all about it, but I loved this
Yeah, I'm about
prologue.
to tell you all about it. So the book begins at the end of the world, where we meet a mother who is grieving her son, Uche. And we learn that we're in this world called the Stillness, which,
Hmm.
even though it's called the Stillness, it's like the total opposite of that because it's a world that's full of life. And we're told that the world keeps basically trying to eat the people there.
Yes.
And there's this city, Eumenis, which continues to persist and is like this big terrifying city that has this object in the middle that's like a precious stone and it's called the Black Star. And that's where a
Hmm.
lot of the leaders meet, but we're told that the leaders don't matter. That's not about them. We don't
This
care about the
is
leaders. And
I love how much this book is like very into being conversational with the readers by being one of the
for
deepest
sure.
world building. Like you and I've only read like a couple of like high fantasy novels, but I would say like this feels high fantasy, even though it's very
Mhm.
conversational and very like down to earth, and it just made me happy.
This is a
Sorry.
unique book to me because I feel like I would throw this one into multiple genres because it's also very sci-fi in my mind.
Right.
I've been seeing it get a lot of traction on socials recently, and I'm like, okay, you know what? Good. People need to have been talking about this series a lot more than they have.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's interesting to see whether or not people classify it as science fiction or fantasy because I think it fits both. So we see we're told that outside of the city of Eumenis, there is a man and a companion that are standing there watching the city below. And we learn that the man is trying to kind of get a grasp of the world around him. And he's letting these things hit his cessipune. And it's called cessing when these people are trying to basically interact with the world around them. And he has a companion who looks female, and we're kind of told that that is not the case, that the companion isn't really female, just appears that way. It's more of a genderless being. And the
Mm-hmm.
companion has skin that is made of white porcelain, essentially. And we're told
Yeah.
that it's a stone eater. And they're conversing, and the man asks basically, like, are the stone eaters going to rise up when the world ends? And the stone eaters kind of like, I don't know. We might. You guys are pretty good at persisting. So then the man basically just breaks the earth. A big ash cloud appears, the earth cracks, and we're also told that there's these obelisks that exist in the clouds and that basically people have kind of forgotten about them and
Mm-hmm.
don't pay attention to them the way that they should. And so then we kind of switch over to the woman that we were told about at the beginning, and her son died, and she's in a city or a village called Torimo. And they're going to receive basically the aftershock of what happened in Eumenis. And we learned that the woman's name is Esun, and she's a mother of two. She's a dark-skinned, strong, broad-hipped woman. And
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important to include that because I really appreciate that this is a character who does not have your typical build of
She's
a
not sinewy and lithe
yes,
and a ballerina who is also stronger than the world. Yeah, yeah, I did
a
appreciate that.
heroine who doesn't have your typical build. Yeah, I really appreciate that. She doesn't look the way that all of our like genuinely most of our heroines look. So
Yes.
I really think that it's important to mention that. And we learned that Esun's son Uche was beaten to death. Um, Trigger warnings abound for this
Yeah.
whole section because a lot of rough things happen. And
Well, because we
Tarimo,
found out that it's by his father. Like that's one of the first
well, I'm getting there.
sentences is,
Yeah.
oh, okay, sorry.
But Tarimo was basically unscathed, and we learned this is due to the presence of a raga, which is a magical person, someone who can manipulate the elements. And then there's an object that is there in Tarimo that is kind of like a kidney bean shape of sorts, and it like comes out of this geode, and it's like hissing and cooling, kind of like
Hmm.
it was really hot. And we see that it's a quote unquote boy. And he breaks out of and eats this stone and then moves toward Torimo to get closer. And we're told that at ends and beginnings, the ends and beginnings are connected, but this is the way that the world ends for the very last time. And so then we switch over
Which is
to,
also a beautiful section because it like says something like the like a lot of time the world ends, but that it doesn't actually end because the planet continues. But this is the way the world ends for the last time.
yes.
It's
So
beautiful writing.
there's very much this theme throughout this section for sure, where we have just the cyclic nature and the
Hmm.
persisting of humanity and how throughout its many disasters the earth continues to persist and so do humans, even though like not all humans will survive all of the different natural disasters that occur in our lives. There is life that persists.
Hmm.
So what's the end may be the beginning for someone else. So
Right?
we switch over to our own point of view, the second POV, which this book is like famous for having this
Yes.
second POV. This is the thing that everyone talks about, but it's also a
I think it's the
really
one thing I knew about this book, and I thought it was like
sure,
I
sure.
thought it was a little bit different, but this is the one thing I knew.
I
So,
have only read, I think, just two books that have a second POV, second person POV, and
yeah.
I really like it. So we learned that we are Esun, the Orogen whose son died, and not many people know what we are. We are a teacher at the local creche, the local school, and our husband Jija is a stone napper we have another child named Nasun, and we are grieving the death of our son, Uche, who we learn was brutally murdered by our our husband Jija. And then we're basically just in our home grieving. And this man, Lerna, a young doctor from town, comes to our home and he sees that Uche is dead and tries to cover him up. And we remind Lerna that Uche is afraid of the dark. Please don't
Well,
cover him up.
Uche is like 3 or 4. He's
He's a
very
toddler.
young. Yes.
He's a toddler. Yeah.
Yes.
And so we're really depressed and shocked and tired. So Lerna takes care of us. We try to remain in this state of thoughtlessness. And we have this dream of our husband Jija beating Uche to death. And
Mhm.
it's horrible because it starts off as a dream of them playing, but then it quickly evolves into a horrible, brutal death. And we wake up screaming, and Lerna comforts us. And he tells us that something's happening in the north and that people are heading south. And all of the surrounding towns are ruined. And it's kind of a unique thing that Torimo is pretty unscathed.
Mhm.
And so we cessed the shake. It was extremely strong, and we say that, a newborn could have cessed it. And Lerna knows what we are, and we're kind of wondering if they're going to put us in like lockdown and at what point lockdown is going to occur in terms of like people entering and exiting Torimo. And then we mentioned that the gates need to be guarded because of stone lore. That's what stone lore tells us, is that gates need to be guarded. So then Lerna tells us that Uche is in the infirmary, being kept cold, and asks if Jija was his murderer. And he wonders how we saved Torimo and admits he knew that we were orogenic and says that Jija found out what Uche was,
Mhm.
that Uche was like us. And
Yeah.
because Uche is little and without a lot of control over his orogeny, that he was easy to pick out,
Mhm.
unfortunately.
Well, we also find out that Lerna might have been part of like a rebellious group who like actually sees the orogenic people as like human. And so that was
Hmm.
why he kind of kept this as a secret and why he
There's
had like noticed you know.
there's very much this huge divide between stills and the origins, who are very much frowned upon, and there's this huge prejudice
Mhm.
towards them. They're considered less than, and so origins very much keep their identity a secret
Right.
and try to protect themselves. So we have been trying to keep ourselves a secret, and even though we know that Lerna knows about this, we don't bring it up, and we also have our children who are like us, so we're not
Mhm.
saying anything about it to protect them. And Lerna says that he's not going to reveal our secret, and that people have kind of started guessing what Uche was because of the shakes,
Yeah.
and then all of the things that have happened since that. So then Lerna leaves, and we finally like get the strength to wash up, and we're wondering like what happened with Jija and where is Nasun? And we realize that we're going to have to find Nasun before the townsfolk kind of realize that we are Origin
Mhm.
and that they start to come for us.
Well, we're kind of taking like at this point we're taking like the event like to our benefit where it's like everything is kind of like overrun. These people are coming from the south, so now's the time to get out
It's a
while
moment
the
of
dust is
chaos.
still settling. Yeah.
It's a moment of chaos, so we need to move quickly before people start to be able to organize, is what's happening basically. So then we go into on different POV, and we meet a girl named Demaya who
Mhm.
is basically horribly abused. She's sleeping in a barn in the straw, and she's dreaming of a blanket in her room. And her mother comes to the barn with this man who has this like Scottish accent. I will say, if you're able to get access to the audiobook, Robin Miles narrates the audiobook very well and does an excellent job bringing this particular character to life. But Demaya assumes that the man is a child buyer, that she's being sold into slavery or some
Mhm.
horrible situation. And the man actually ends up reprimanding Demaya's mother for the conditions that Demaya's in because she's being forced to just like defecate in the corner and that there's no blankets, that she doesn't have a coat or anything. And
Well,
then
and the
we're
mom
also,
tries to like blame Demaya, being like, I raised her better than this. And he's like, well, did you provide her
but
with
there's no
anything?
toilet. Like,
Yeah, like what did you
where's the toilet
expect?
to go?
Yeah.
So we're also kind of given a little bit of background that Demaya's name is Demaya Strongback. She has a use name that most people are given a use name to kind of designate what their job is. And then the following name tells where they're from. So they have like their first name, their use name, and then the name that explains where they're from. And people who are comless, they don't really have a place that they're from or like a purpose.
Hmm.
So Demaya continues to hide in the barn. She doesn't want to like meet the man, and eventually the man figures
Well,
out where
she's
she's at.
incredibly fearful of like this person who buys people. Like she's
Well,
like,
yeah.
he buys people. He's going to buy me. And like
Well, and
she,
she's definitely like assessing him and
mhm,
trying to figure out like what's going on here because she's like, this doesn't seem like the right situation here. And eventually he's able to like gain her trust. And he does this thing where he like presses into her cessapina and
mhm,
she feels it and she's like, what the heck just happened there? And he kind of blows it off and he's like, okay, well, we're going. We're going to go to the south to Humanus. And it's kind of a surprise to Demaya's mother because she's like, oh, I thought you were just coming to kill her.
yeah.
And she was like, I thought we were just doing the stillness of service. I thought we were helping our people because we figured out that she was an origin because she hurt a boy at school. And so we thought we were
Hmm.
doing y'all a favor. So she's a little shocked when the man is like, no, I'm going to take her to the fulcrum and she's going to learn how to use her power and to use her curse, is what he says. And he reveals himself to be a guardian and says that his name is Shafa Guardian Warrant. And the guardians are like almost a legendary figure of sorts where
Hmm.
they are these warriors or assassins and they're really like considered heroes during seasons, which are these big cataclysmic moments that occurred that are big natural events. And so Shafa kind of explains how the origins serve the world and how his role as a guardian is tied into this purpose. And he also says that he has now 6 origins in his care
Hmm.
and that he received the message about Demaya when he stopped at a node station.
Yeah, like there's also a weird part of this section where like he does like reprimand Demaya's mother, but he also is like very specific with Demaya of like you should be happy that your parents treated you like this. Like there's much more going on. Like you have to see the full picture that like you revealing yourself um made them unsafe and made your
Oh,
brother unsafe. And so
yes,
there's
it's
a
very
lot
much
of
a
like
situation where he's like, look, I know that this seems awful, but they were also protecting themselves by doing this to you. And that hiding an orogenic child and not training them can go really badly because they can, be killed in the process of like the child trying to gain control of their powers or that they could lose their home if they're found out or their children could be taken away, etc. So he's kind of like, look, I know this is awful and they are really awful for doing that, but don't be too mad at them because they're also just trying to protect themselves here. Like what else are they supposed to do? And it's like, well,
yeah, it was it
not
was a
treat her
very
like a
weird
piece of crap.
it was a very weird like complex issue that was like dealt with in a way that I felt was like interesting for character building, and we'll talk more about the characters I'm sure when the book is done, but it was like
Hmm.
it was interesting to see how he spoke about her parents and how he spoke about her, where he was like, well, we do this for your own good, and I was
Oh
like, well,
yes.
that is a red flag if I ever heard one. So
Safa is a master of manipulation, as we
yeah.
will find. And he explains that what she's doing when she's feeling the earth moving is cessing, and that when she's doing that, she's also protecting herself. And he kind of asks her to reflect on the incident at school and explains that her training will allow her to become valuable, which that
Hmm.
was a red flag to me,
Yep.
that some of the wording of the things that he says. And he also kind of then flips it again
You
and is like,
are
it's not your
deformed
fault. It's not your
and you
fault.
are
Like,
ugly.
Yeah,
These are crimes for which the world has little pity. I am your only friend.
very much those vibes. Very much those vibes. If we could only get it in Scottish.
I can't sing in Scottish. I am so sorry.
So we'll have to call Robin Miles. Uh,
Perfect.
so
Could
then,
you sing for us, Frollo?
yes, could you sing this song from Shafa's voice? Thank you, Robin. So then basically what happens is Demaya's father comes and he's prepared Shafa's horse, and which is like this ginormous horse because Shafa is this
Mhm.
giant white person with long
Yeah.
dark hair that's super straight. And Demaya's never really seen a person like Shafa, and she's like,
Yeah.
okay, well, he's got weird eyes. This is interesting.
Yeah, because his eyes are like whitish, aren't they? If I'm
They're like a
remembering.
light color, which I
Yeah.
was assuming to be like a grayish or bluish.
Okay, got
And
it.
that's kind of considered to be I think it's a bad omen if I'm remembering right.
Yeah.
So basically Shafa is like, all right, let's go. And he's like, don't cry because when they can see you, uh, they'll see it as like not being safe. Like they
Yeah.
don't want you don't want to reveal your emotions, basically. It will basically jeopardize your own safety and that
Very
of
much
others.
like you can't show emotions because you are angry
Control,
and you can't
conceal, don't feel. Don't let it show.
you cannot control your own emotions and people should be afraid of you. You should
Mhm.
be the one who controls those issues. Yes.
And so basically, she has this moment as they're leaving where she looks back and Shafa's leading her out, and her family's watching in fear. And she realizes that it's very much a fear motivated situation, that they are fearful in all directions, that her brother, that she has grown up with and really cares for, Chaga, he doesn't even wave. And Shafa turns around and is like, don't look back. So then we switch back to our point of view, and we're basically just trying to figure out where Nasun would be buried
Mm-hmm.
and how to get out of Torimo.
And
And
Nasun is our daughter.
our daughter, correct?
Yes.
So,
Because she's missing and she's worried that and
well, because
we are
at this point we're
worried that
unsure,
Jija killed our daughter as well as our son.
correct? Because we're like not for sure what happened here. We want to find out what happened. So we go back and we need to get out of there basically before people come for us. So we go back to our house and we're preparing supplies and we are trying to stay prepared before seasons. And we realize that we probably should have been a little more careful in planning because the clothes that we have packed, they're like not going to fit Nasun anymore. They're too small. And so we want to find and end Jija, but then we have to rephrase our thoughts. We tell ourselves to be
Mhm.
better, that basically like be the better person. Don't go for revenge.
Again, because conceal don't feel because it's
Conceal,
interesting
don't
because
feel, don't let it show.
I thought this
And
was really good with the section before where it's like, oh, I have to monitor my own emotions because I do not have control when I'm not 100%
yes,
on all the time.
yes. So we're basically filled with rage thinking about Jija, and we think about like why we chose the house that we are going through because it was isolated, and we're trying to control our emotions and assess what's going on in the north. And we're also trying to think about like all the things going on around us and at the same time remain thoughtless. And we realize that in the current chaos, nobody's really paying attention. So this is a moment where we have to act quickly. And we find the leader of Torimo, Rask, who is hiding in basically a really pathetic excuse for a library. And he asks about what happened and asks about Jija, but basically knows what happened and knows that there's and says that there's gossip. Jija left with the horse and wagon with Nasun. And so this
Hmm.
changes everything for us because we didn't realize that she was alive. And
Hmm.
we also then have to have this conversation with Rask about Jija. And it's something where we're having complicated feelings because Jija was never a violent person. And we mentioned to Rask that it makes it harder knowing
Yeah.
that he was never violent, that he would do this. And
Well,
Rask knows that
when
we're trying to get out of there and reveals that, and he seems to want us to get out of there. And he also just reveals that his sister was in fact an origin.
yeah. Well, this is a good section on showing like the limitations of progressivism a lot. Like I
For
thought it was
sure.
very apt to show like, well, he was so nice, he was so kind, until the world did not fit the picture in his head. And
Right.
then he was quick to fall on, hatred and pure, like,
It's a very
vitriol.
good
Like, yeah.
example of like how people will say that they are willing to stand up for what's right,
Hmm.
but then when they're actually in the midst of something, things change.
I recently saw a
And
TikTok
how
that said,
fear can
like,
really change people.
a TikTok recently said, like, girl, you couldn't give up Amazon and Starbucks. You're not Alphaba.
Exactly. Exact. All of those memes were, or not memes, those TikToks where people are like, so and so coming out of Wicked, and it's like it's
Yeah.
me. I love those so much.
It's
It's
me.
everyone like
Yeah.
inserting themselves into the alphabet of it all, but not realizing like, yeah, you couldn't give up Starbucks. So
Yeah, no, you're not Alphaba. I'm so sorry. Alphaba was
yes,
ostracized.
exactly.
Like, I don't think you've had that happen to you recently,
Or ever.
or ever. Yeah. Excuse you. Um,
Exactly. So basically, Rask walks us out, and people are staring at us as we leave town. And there's like these men that don't want to let us leave. They're kind of giving some pushback. And Rask is like, look, I'm sorry about Jija, which really stings because we're like, but what about Uche? Like, you're not sorry for
mhm,
him. That sucks. And so then we're starting to leave and prepare to leave, and we're getting emotional and at the same time trying to control it. And this woman shoots at us, and so we instinctually protect ourselves, and we use the earth and air and turn the bolt that comes at us into flex. And then we hear this voice in our head, and then the other townspeople start shooting at us. So we continue to protect ourselves and control the earth and air while the people are around us just shooting at us and causing chaos. And we start to let our emotions kind of get the best of us, and we blame the people who are shooting at us because they're the cowards who
mhm.
killed him, and their hate is what led to Uche's death.
And
And we,
this is like such a good, like, because again, this is a book that uses the second person and it's very unique, where in this moment she's like, we are like, you killed him, you meaning you plural, even though you're
yes,
speaking to you specific. So she's speaking to the Rask at the time, and he is
hmm
someone who just showed her kindness. But there is a moment of like, that's not enough. Like, you like are willing to help me in this moment because you remember your sister, but like the you
well, it's a huge
plural.
betrayal. And
Hmm.
even though they single-handedly did not do it the way that Jija did, it's the combination of the system and
Hmm.
their own prejudices which have led to our child's death. So we
Yes.
blame them all.
Yeah.
And we end up splitting the valley floor. And basically, we're going to kill the town because the wells are going to go dry. And we
Yes.
continue to manipulate the elements. And uh, we think that their violence and hatred killed Uche, as I said before. And basically, we just start killing them as they try to get near us because they killed our son. They're Jija to us. They're the reason that all of this happened.
Well, we
And
make them like stone stiff, it says, with like a
yes,
flesh turning to gray as his hair. Like, it's like
yes,
we are turning people to stone at like around us.
yes. And so we kill them all as they're coming near us. And then we have this moment where we realize that we're actually the ones who killed Uche, who sentenced him to death basically just by being his mother, that we are death itself.
Well, and we get pulled out of it because we see someone with their son, and it's like a moment
Yes.
of like, I can't do this to anyone. And I was like, oh, what a look at like generational trauma of like, I cannot cause the harm that was caused to me just
hmm
by like my anger. So,
Yes. So in the next chapter, we meet a new character, Cyanite, who is an Origin 4 ringer, who is been assigned a mentor, a 10 ringer mentor, and they are being given this assignment to essentially clean coral reefs. But there's like the true project is that they want the two of them to produce a child.
and
And
these people can cess, correct? Like the
correct, the
ringers.
origins
Yes.
can cess.
Yes.
The origins are the ones with the Cessipinae that can cess.
Yes.
And so Cyanite is making her way through the Fulcrum and past the Guardians and the Junior Origins, and she makes her way up to like the Ten Ringers floor where her new mentor is. And she's kind of amazed because he has this whole floor to himself, and she's like, "This is what status earns you, privacy." And it's
Mhm.
something that she kind of longs for is like her own status, and it's why she wants to do this mission. and everything, go on this assignment. And so she,
Well, and this is a society of people who like help make the world run, but it is based on what type of ring you are, is based on like what status you are. So the fact that he is a 10 ringer, he is like at the
yes, there are
height of
rankings that you
status.
can get within
Yes.
the fulcrum. So you start off like 1 ring, 2 ring, 3 rings, and it's very rare to be a 10 ringer. And usually, if someone is a 10 ringer, they're really old.
Hmm.
So when she knocks on the door and the person answers, it's a man who's like 40 years old. And she's shocked because she's like, usually people would be super old if they were a 10
Hmm.
ringer. And this guy is only about 40. And I think Sinai is in her 20s.
Yes, she's
Um,
yeah, she's 20 or so.
and the guy at the door, he's really annoyed, and he basically is like, "Get the F out of here. I don't want you here." And she's like, "Aren't you happy? I'm here for sex. I like they want us to produce a child together." And he's like, basically, he's like annoyed with her being there, and he's like, "Whatever, they've sent women up here many times for the same purpose. At first, I kind of thought that they were interested, but now I know that basically I'm just being farmed out. They're just using me for breeding, and I'm pretty annoyed by that."
Well, it's like incredibly dehumanizing because like
Oh,
he's like, well, the
absolutely.
first ones they convinced me like, yes, they wanted me, and it is this weird thing where she's like, again, she's like, well, you have the status, people are happy to do this for you. I am here. It's my body that will have to have these changes. It's my body that has to procreate, and it's one of those things where he's like, yeah, but like I was lied to, and like my status means like all these things also happened to me, and it's like
Right.
it's not fun. Like,
And so she's basically like, well, let's just do it. Just get it over with. And he's like, no. And he basically says that he was born in the fulcrum and he was bred to order, and that cyanite was not. He calls her a feral because she was born from a family that's never really shown orogeny. And so it's hard to predict what produces orogeny. And he says that she's proof that they'll never truly understand them. And they want desperately to understand them. That's why they're breeding people, because they want to like think that they have this grasp over orogeny, but they just
well,
don't,
and he also says you're a feral, and she's like utterly shocked by this. And he's like, no, that's what they call you. They don't do it to your
right?
face because they have all these rules and strictures, but I'm letting you behind this door that you don't even know exists. And she's like, oh my gosh, they do look down on me. And it is a very specific thing of she feels like if she could just become like a fifth ringer or a sixth ringer, like she can fight her way to the top. And it
She
is,
thinks that status is going to help her.
mhm,
And really it's meaninless, and he's kind of proving that to her, that he's like,
mhm.
look, this doesn't mean anything. I'm super powerful. They still use me like a stud ram. Like, it's not worth it. Like, who even
Yeah.
cares? And so she's like starting to question if she's bad or good. She's like, I'm a feral. Like, is that a good thing? She's like, but I should maybe be flattered that they want me to reproduce with this super powerful guy. And it's like an interesting situation because she's really questioning like what she should feel in this moment,
Yeah.
because she's unsure if she's actually good or bad, or whether or not it's like a compliment to be there
Like,
to.
oh my gosh, you have such a pretty face for someone in like of your
Well,
size. And it's
it's
like,
more like,
excuse
you
you?
show so much potential. We are going to use you to breed with this man who is extremely powerful. And then she shows up there and he's like, yeah, they're just treating us like animals. Don't be
Yeah,
flattered at all. And so
come
then she's
on.
like, wait a minute, I thought this was good. So it's a very complicated situation. And so basically, she eventually like convinces the man that, like, let's have sex, let's make it happen. And they're unable to, because obviously if you are not in the mood, it's not going to happen, and it's not great. They don't feel good about it. And then he basically reveals that he's kind of jealous of her because she grew up outside of the fulcrum, and that she
Hmm.
had another name, and that basically his entire existence is just in
Well, they do
dedication
have
to that
sex though.
place.
Sorry, not, but they do copulate at some point. Like they are able to that
Oh,
first night.
I,
Yeah.
I said that it
Oh, okay,
it
sorry. I
was
thought you
bad,
said you
and
were. Okay, it was
it
bad.
was
Yeah.
bad, and they don't feel good about it.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, then he basically is like, all right, well, I'll be your mentor. Let's meet up the next day so we can quote unquote get the coral out of this reef or whatever. And Cyanite basically decides, she's like, yeah, I'm willing to keep doing this because I still think it's important to increase my status. Like, I'll just kind of deal with this for a year, I'll produce a kid, and then I'll be able to have increased status and keep moving up the ranks.
Hmm.
So then we switch back over to our point of view, and basically we're exhausted at this point. And we realize that we are powerful and a weapon to control. And we assess our surroundings, and we're basically noticing that everything's changing to prepare for the season. And we notice that the obelisk above is kind of a little more apparent, and we think about heading south. And we go to this roadhouse, and we recognize people are starting to kind of figure out what's going on. They're panicking. And there's a change. There's someone watching us, and we look over, and it's a small boy, and we don't know what he is at first. And he looks like he's 6 or 7 years old, and he's absolutely filthy. And he says his name is Hoa. He's alone and quiet, and he says he likes us, and so we share that role with him. Then we are back with Demaya and Shafa, and they're on the road. And
This
this
is
is
also during this past section, though, we do find out that like orogeny is also like it's a strong equation. It's like power in, power out. So you have to have some amount of like
it's tied
power
to the
around you.
earth.
Yeah,
Yes.
so there is like it's not just this all-encompassing like we are powerful. There are rules to it, and
Yes,
like
you
we're
have to
trying to
harness
figure
the
that.
energy of the earth itself. Like it's
Yes.
continually referred to as like Father Earth, and
Mm-hmm.
harnessing the power within the earth and then feeding back out of it.
Yep.
So we're on the road with Shafa and Demaya again, and this is such a weird, like, kind of crushing chapter. So basically, they're on the road and they go to an inn, and Demaya's kind of like liking this traveling situation. She's with Shafa. They're going to inns. She's getting a bed and good food. And she's like, oh, this is kind of nice. And she's like, Shafa's the only person who has ever cared for me. So this is great. And she also recognizes that Shafa's got stuff going on because he's having these terrible nightmares.
Mm-hmm.
And so they keep moving to Yumenis, and Shafa explains shakes to her and how he notices her sussing, and he's like, you need to stop doing that. And he tells her the story of Shemshina. And this occurs in like the third season in the season of Teeth, and it's long before the Fulcrum. And he explains that the origins didn't always survive childhood due to a lack of training, and that there was this origin named Misalem who trained himself and became like a fourth or fifth ringer, one of the rankings in the Fulcrum. And Misalem decided he was going to use his control in order to kill thousands of people.
Mm-hmm.
And Shafa explains that Misalem must have been mad, and then orders the emperor to meet with him in order to gain further control and enact his plan to kill thousands. But the emperor shows up with Shemshina, and Shafa kind of explains that there's this kinetic transference, which you were mentioning, Hannah,
Mm-hmm.
and how it works, and that Demaya is going to learn how to do these things at the Fulcrum, but some things will have to come from within her. And Shemshina was able to take away the things that could be controlled by the origin. And
Mm-hmm.
therefore, Misalim was unable to harness this power to destroy the city in the thousands. And so then Shemshina was able to distract and kill Misalim. And this is the beginning of the Guardians. And it's a really like scary moment because Demaya starts out really liking this story until she realizes that
That
she's the
she's the
bad
evil
guy.
person. Yeah.
And she's like, wait a minute, that is awful. And she's like, I don't like these stories anymore. And so then they continue talking as they're passing through these ruined places. And Shafa explains that, you need to learn to control yourself. And
You are deformed and you are ugly.
and he has this moment where he squeezes her hand as they're talking, and then
Mm-hmm.
he breaks her hand in a horrific way.
Mm-hmm.
And he asks her to control herself. And she manages to do it, and he praises her, which this is the creepiest thing where he's being violent to her and then praising her like she's an animal. And
You did such a good job at. Yeah, it's gross.
It's terrifying. And then he's praising her, and she's obviously screaming and having a hard time with her hand being broken. And she
Mm-hmm.
tells him no, and he tells her never to say no to her guardian as he's
Mm-hmm.
keeping the world safe from her. And so then he says that he loves her, and Demaya is honestly confused. Like, can you imagine hearing this type of story, thinking that this person actually cares from you because you've lived a life of abuse for quite a while now, and then experiencing this violence? So then he's like, you know what? You did a good job
And she
controlling
does buy
yourself.
into it where she's like, he loves me. Like
Oh,
this
absolutely.
is what I have to feel because this is what I deserve. Yeah.
Absolutely. She's totally buying into the stereotypes about herself. And so then he, I guess, rewards her by setting the bones in her hand instead of further crushing her hand. And Demaya asks if she can go home. And he's like, you don't have a home anymore, but you will soon when we get to the fulcrum. And then he asks her, he's like, are you afraid of me? And she's like, yeah. And
Yeah.
he's like, well, good, because you need to be afraid of me because you have to remain in control of your power and I have to remain in control over you.
Yeah.
And it's a really, really creepy warning. Like
Yeah.
I'm so bothered by it. And then they go
This
to
this
sleep.
section was horrifying because it is like she's a child who a
Yes.
boy was like we found out like this boy that she hurt, he was violent towards her and she was scared. And even
She
in
was trying to
this
protect herself in that moment.
he was like, "Well, were you scared or were you like this?" And she was like, "I was scared and angry." And he's like, "Well, it's because you can't control your anger and your fear that I have to protect you." And there's no
He's basically
actual
like, get it together.
yeah, there's no actual like help or like here's how you can emote responsibly. It's all like no, no, no. As your guardian, I emote for you now. I can cause you pain and like I can break your hand and then he like threatens to crush it and you're just sitting there like this is a
Totally
child.
without repair. Like,
And she's sitting there like after it he sets her bones for her and she's sitting there like it is showing like cycles of abuse and generational trauma and how like someone who is harmed by the people she loves could be confused with future relationships because she's like, well, at least he's not keeping me in a barn. At least he stood up
right.
for
I got
me
to eat. I
and my
got to lay
mom.
on a bed.
And it's horrifying to like read this section where he's like, I am in control of you, and it's because of how you are that I have to act this way. It's like abuse
Right.
101.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so then the chapter ends, they go to sleep, and Shafa wakes her up. And this is a callback to the previous section with Demaya and Shafa, where he says, you're making a noise. And she basically was like, was I snoring? My brother says I do that a lot. And he's like, oh, yeah, snoring. Don't worry. I won't tease you about it like your brother did.
Ugh,
And it's just ugh,
it's so
gross.
gross.
And then she's basically realized, like, well, my entire life is a nightmare now. And
Mm-hmm.
all of my interactions with this man are going to be a test.
Yep.
So, and then he's basically, again, abuse 101. He's like, good night. I love you, little one. And it's like, ugh, ugh,
Ugh, he does not, honey. Don't believe
hate
him.
it.
Like,
Hate it.
it's
And so
bad.
then we switch back to our POV and we are on the road then with this boy, Hoa, that we found. And we're like, you know what? He's an issue. He's filthy and naked. And he's not really, we ask him like what his name is, and he's not sure about his use name. He doesn't know about his parents. And he really
We
just
also don't
gives us
believe him.
no, and
Like,
he
we're
gives us
like,
this really
no.
odd vibe. And we're like, something
Yeah.
happened to his family or something. And we're like, this is weird. His eyes are really ice white. And I feel weird about that because ice white eyes are desirable and humanist, but kind of a bad omen everywhere else. And it's hard to get a read on this kid because he's playing and we're like, okay, well, I guess he's a child, so we'll keep him around.
We're
And
also like, but is he older? I don't know.
he's like an old soul, literally, which
Yeah.
is creepy. And
Especially in like
so,
an 8-year-old boy. It's like, please
yes,
no.
yeah, we're
Yeah.
like, this feels weird. So we're walking on the road and people are like kind of looking at us and we're like, oh, it's got to be because he's so dirty. So we take him over to this place where he can wash and he's like, do you want me to clean myself? Is that what this is? And we're like, yeah, get over there and clean yourself. And when he does, we realize that he has this pure white skin and
Mm-hmm.
he's really just kind of a terrifying individual altogether. And so he's like, "Am I clean enough?" And we're like, "Yeah, I guess." And so we help him get dressed and we tell him that he can come with us. And he reveals that he knows we're looking for someone and says he knows where our daughter is. And
Hmm.
he can tell that she's strong in what direction we went. And so we're like, okay, well, you're obviously staying now.
Yeah,
And
I
because
actually need you. You have
I actually
made
need you to
yourself
help me find
useful.
Nasun. And he's like, well, she's going a lot faster than we are. So,
She
like,
was like,
well,
yeah, they have
yeah,
a
because
horse
she's
and
got a
cart.
horse. So, okay.
And we're also like really worried because if Jija realizes, because both of our children actually
Our
uh,
origins, yes.
are origins, and so we're like we
Which
have
we're
to
under the
get.
assumption that Gija must know at this point that
I think
both of
she.
our children are origins, but
I
we're
don't
unsure if
know.
he's figured it
Yeah.
out.
Yeah, like I think there's like fear of like, well, maybe he doesn't know and she's safe,
Right.
but
Like,
maybe she's not.
do I
And
have
like,
time to save Nasun before Gija finds out?
yeah,
Or has
it's
he found out
complicated.
and Nasun is in very serious danger?
Hmm.
So we offer Hoa some food and he's like, I don't eat. And we're just like, you know what? I don't even care anymore. It's getting weird.
We're like, maybe he ate earlier. He has a pack of nothing. So
You don't want
he,
raisins? Are you serious? Okay.
yeah, I would want
So
raisins if I was traveling all day, little
but
boy.
we're at the
Like,
point where we're just like, you know what? I don't even care anymore. We just need him. We need to find Nasun. And so then we in the next chapter switch over our POV. We're with Cyanite, and we learn that the man that is her mentor is named Alabaster. They are traveling together, and he's got an attitude. He's
careful your
very
mic.
he's very fed up with everything that's happening. He doesn't want to be there, and they're still having their sex that is awful, basically.
Well, and also he's like sleeping all day
Yeah,
and like,
and she's getting very annoyed with him. She's like, "Okay, you have an attitude. All you do is sleep all the time." And then she notices that he is quelling all of these shakes that
hmm
are around them in the area. And she's like, we're not encountering very many people. And why are you quelling all of these? And he's like, I'm doing it to give the node maintainers a break. And we learned that there are these nodes, which are these stations that kind of extend out from the fulcrum, and they all are manned with a trained origin. And Cyan doesn't really know of anyone who does this. Usually, people who don't have a lot of control over their orogeny, people that are less than 4 rings, less
hmm
powerful than her. And Alabaster's like, "Oh, so you've never been to one?" And she's like, "No." And he's like, "Well, all Ragas should." And Raga is basically a
a
derogatory name for
yes.
origins. And she she feels weird about him saying this. And he tells her then he's like, "Well, you know, you really should be quelling some of these shakes too." And she's like, "Oh, well, maybe that's why he's so tired all the time is because he's extending all his energy like this." And
But
so
she also is
she
like incredibly derisive of the people who work at these like I mean
at
this
the
is
node
it's at the
stations,
node stations because I'm like, well, we're on fault lines. Like these are people who are at like very dangerous fault lines who are quelling all these like mini earthquake type things,
sure.
And she's kind of like, that's their job. They have nothing better to do all day than make sure that they're doing this. And he's like, well, you should be helping. And she's like, why?
He's like, "You've never been to one of these places. Okay, cool. Yeah, you need to be helping." And
Hmm.
so basically she's like, "Okay, fine. I'll agree to help quell." And uh he's like, "You know what? Let's go to a node station just so you can see."
Yeah.
And basically she like on the way there, they're still having bad sex even though she's late for her period.
Yes.
And he's like, "Not a guarantee, so let's just keep doing this mandated sex." So
So much fun. Although when she starts helping with the felt line, she's like, "Oh my gosh, she actually actively participated." So it sounds like this man is just incredibly exhausted by like holding the world together.
he's been through an incredible amount of trauma, and
Yeah.
he's at the point where he's starting to become more interested in her and why she acts the way she does. And he's like, "Why do you hate me?" And she's like, "I don't know, I just do." And he's like, "I think it's just because you can." And he's like, "You just hate the world and how we have to live, and so you're basically taking it out on me." And he's really questioning their way of living and the way
Hmm.
that stone lore is passed down. And he's like, "I really think we should let Origins have a try at running things." And she's like, "Well, that's not going to work out well because the Guardians will kill them based off of stone lore." And he's like, "What if we change the lore in a way that doesn't result in disaster. And she's like, well, that's not going to work because it's never worked before.
Well, this is like a very, and I mean, you're gonna go on, but like this is a very unique experience because we get to like see this character start being asked the difficult questions in this situation where like she's bought into the legend, she's bought into everything, and then she's with this like battered, beleaguered man who's like, I've seen some shit, and you don't know what you're
Like, you need to
talking
start
about.
questioning things a little more. And she's
Yeah,
like, why? I just want to move up in the ranks, get this baby with you, and be gone.
yeah. Uh,
And so
and
then
so
suddenly this shake
Well,
occurs,
I'm
and
sorry, I cut in on you, so I do apologize. But he talks about how the lore might have changed throughout the years, where she's like, well, the lore says that we would ruin everything. And he's like, well, the lore has been changed before.
well,
Like,
yeah,
I've
that's what I said. That
traveled.
he's
Yeah,
like, I want to change the lore in a way that doesn't result in disaster like it has before. And she's like, oh, well, how do we do that? Because it's been changed before and it didn't go well.
yeah,
So then this shake occurs from really far away, and Alabaster is quelling it, and he basically has to, it's so powerful that he has to grab onto her for support too. And she's really confused because she's like, I didn't know that origins could quote unquote work together. But they
mm-hmm,
do in order to quell this, and then they end up exhausted. But
mm-hmm,
Alabaster's like, we need to go to the Note Station right away. And he reveals that that's what set the shake off. And they get there
mm-hmm,
quickly, and it's giving like these really creepy vibes. It's very much styled like the old Empire. And Alabaster says that the node maintainers, they don't have guardians there. They're usually just people that are posted at the gate in order to protect the maintainers. And from the looks of things, they're likely all dead. So they go
yes.
into the station and it's really quiet and dark, and there are corpses and dead animals that are basically covered in ice, and they're kind of thawing a little bit. And it looks like they tried to flee the area but were frozen. And in the middle of this building is this node chamber, which holds this big chair that has like a bunch of wires and straps coming off of it. And it's this reclined chair of sorts. And there's a small node maintainer's body in
Yeah.
the chair. It's a small, naked person whose muscles are all atrophied. And there's a bag attached to them that is for feces, and it hasn't been
So
changed.
it's like this person who we find out like this is what they do with the node, like with the node
Yes, this
keepers,
is a
where,
big reveal for Cyan,
yeah,
where she hasn't really known anything about node maintainers. She thought that they were literally like people that just sent there to try and quell shakes, but she learns that basically children, babies,
yes,
are taken there if they don't show a lot of potential. And
yes.
they're basically put in this almost comatose state
Mm-hmm.
where they're forced to control quells in the areas around them, or they're
Yes.
forced to quell the shakes in the areas around them.
Well, and it's a
And
moment where we also find out that it's people who like might have been found too late in their power, so they
yes,
couldn't
they
ever
they have a
control
lack
it.
of control.
And so it's also a moment where we find out like, oh, this could have been her future if she had been like
Right.
different or found at a different stage in life. And so it's like a weird sliding doors moment for her.
It's also like a sad moment too, because again we're given that word of valuable.
Mhm.
They're considered still valuable if they're able to
Yes.
be used in this way. And Alabaster reveals that the child was probably allowed to wake up, and in the assumption that someone was going to sexually abuse the child, because
Yes.
apparently people are sick and like that. And likely what happened, why this shake was because the child reacted, because that's how origins protect themselves, is in these reactions. And Science, like, whole world is rocked in these moments because she's like totally shocked that origins are not treated well and not valued in the
Well,
way that she kind of thought they were. She was like, you know what? I think things are crappy for us, but I think generally people respect us, maybe. And it's like, nope, absolutely no respect.
it's definitely looking at like the way that the world is structured, though, where it's like, well, as long as you're powerful enough and you are beneficial to the system, you are safe. So she thought that as long as she was beneficial and useful, like you were saying, then no harm could come to them. But then you find out that there are these children who they're like, well, yes, they are still useful. but we are going to put them in this unsafe position, and these soldiers dehumanize them to the point of letting people come in and sexually assault them and do it in this way that's like she just finds out like, oh no, it's so much worse, and just being useful is not enough to keep you safe.
Right.
And
And
that's
then she's,
yeah.
I think, questioning too, like what happens when we're not valuable anymore?
Hmm.
When we have no value, what becomes of us? And then they camp out in the station basically because they're like, where are we supposed to go? And
Yeah.
Alabaster reveals that he's been forced to make children for a long time. And he's like, that child very well could have been mine. It kind of
Hmm.
looked like me. It could have been my kid.
Yeah.
And he's like, you know what? He's not, we can make a still that would maybe be better, but the thing is they'll still watch the child and everything because the orogeny always comes back in future generations, so they'll never be free.
Well,
So
and I
there's
also
really
thought he
no
kind of
escape.
hinted at like if it would like be worse because like they would never be taken care of because no
Right.
parent would adopt. Because she's like, well, if we had a still child, maybe they'd give it up for adoption. And it's this like beautiful, like, well, maybe we could have this like
She thinks there's a way
beautiful,
out, and he's like, there's
yeah.
never a way out.
Like you have to get real because this is the way
Hmm.
that this world works. And this is why I am it's pretty much him being like, this is why I am the way that I am. Could you back off like all the
Well, and it's
way?
this terrifying moment too, because he's like, you know what? Forget everything you saw here today for your own good.
Hmm.
Forget it all. And then he just starts laughing, this
Yeah.
like terrifying laugh. And she's terrified. Cyan's terrified in this moment because she's like, this is this man who is so powerful and he's mad. I don't know what's going on here. And she's like, where's your guardian? And he's like, oh, I took care of her a long time ago. She's no threat. And he's basically like, look, you'll be crazy too if you hang around me long enough. And he says, you should do the world a favor and kill me. And then basically they go to sleep. And
Hmm.
it's just a really haunting moment,
Well,
honestly. Like I really appreciated the way that Jemison wrote this because it's setting up the world so well and showing us the trauma that these characters have gone through.
yes. Well, it's also very interesting because like I feel like he is the character who's almost like if we're going for like chaotic, like good, I feel like he's like so much it's a weird either chaotic neutral or chaotic good where like he doesn't know what to do or like where he's like I know that the world is messed up and I'm so angry by it but I do not have the like and I have a level of privilege but I don't have the level of privilege to be safe or
Right.
to have like certain choices and so he doesn't know what to do with that so in this section it almost felt like he like wanted her to know that that existed but he doesn't know what to do after that
He
like
doesn't
there's
have a
no
solution for
after
it. He wants
yeah
to, he's putting the info out there, but he's like, here's what we're dealing with. Now what?
yes
And she's just kind of like,
you just
okay.
crushed my entire world and he's like yeah mine too like
He's like,
it's
my
so
whole world.
this is
She's
how
like,
I
my
feel
whole world
all the
is a lie. And
time
he's like, I also have thought that I've been crazy all this time. And you know
hmm
what? I am.
yep
And it's just a maddening and infuriating moment for him. And
yep
I think it's brilliant. And then this chapter ends with winter, spring, summer, fall, death is the fifth and master of all, which I thought was
Mm.
like a really cool proverb.
Oh
And
yeah.
so then this section that we're going to be covering ends with an interlude, which
Hmm.
explains that people of the stillness don't speak of islands and other continents, that there's this lore that says that there's nothing else. And
Hmm.
they basically don't notice what's beyond them. And they can't miss what they don't think about, what they don't imagine. And so then it's mentioned that it's fortunate that there are more than just humans in terms of the people in this world, which
Well, and I
is an
love
interesting omen, or
this
like a
because
bad omen.
it's also a moment where like I feel like Jemison's talking to us. Like this is what I like is like it feels like so high fantasy and this huge world building and all of these different
But also
elements
very
that were
pertinent to
but
our
like
world.
oh very pertinent to our world and just like she's in conversation with us where she's like, "Well, I'm talking about you. You're in the story." And it's like I love this in this
Wake up and look
interlude,
around you.
a break in the pattern, a snarl in the weft. There are things you should be noticing here. And it's like this very specific element of books where it's like, have you noticed no one's talking about other worlds, that this is just one world? There are no islands. There's nothing. Like, we're only talking about this one place. And what do you think about that? I'm like,
Doesn't that seem a
yeah.
little odd?
I really loved that like she seems in conversation with us and like calling us out. If it's like, hey, did you
Sure,
just like buy into this without having any questions? You should be questioning just as much
sure.
as any other reader. And I found that very fascinating. So, this is
But
my first
that's it
read.
for our first section.
Laura only lets me read section by section, so I have no
Yep.
idea what comes next. But I'm enjoying it. I can say for Hannah making guesses at what's going to happen. I'm going to preface this because I'm going to guess some things for this book. I'm going to preface this with I'm sure I'm wrong. And I'm my type of reading, like I always believe in like foreshadowing and you should notice what books should do, but I also am a firm believer in like authors don't want you to guess everything. So there are many times where an author will be like, I'm going to lay this seed, but it goes nowhere because I want to keep you guessing. So I
Sure.
also think sometimes I'm like, well, sometimes I'll pick up a seed, but if the author doesn't pick it up later, that's their business. It's not my business. I do wonder if we're mixing timelines here just with the way the book is set up. If we are, oh, Laura's giving me a maybe not. But I could see where this is a book that like plays with timelines later on. So I wondered about that, and I wondered about the obelisks and everything, and I think they will
Well,
come
the
into
obelisk is a
play.
great guess because the next book is
Oh yeah, I
got
forgot.
obelisk in the title. So,
I forgot about that. I've been running away from everything about these books for so long for the past year when we decided that we're going to do this. But um oh yeah, it's the obelisk's gate. So yes, the obelisk will become a very big part. I didn't realize like
so
there are certain
pay
parts
attention
like
to the obelisks because nobody's paying attention to them and clearly
yeah,
need to be.
they're important. And I know like there are certain things where Laura rereading this and doing the plot breakdown was helpful because there are certain parts that I missed. Like I missed that like we kind of got to see Hoa come into creation and I'm like, "Oh,
Right, right,
that
right.
was important." So, um I think that that's helpful. And I just can't wait to find out more. So I don't really have a ton of guesses so far, but we will
I
see.
think it's better to go with just vibes on this one and no
That's
guesses.
fair. That's fair. But join us next week as we cover through the second interlude.
Yeah, so
Uh,
that'll be page, if you have the paperback, it will be page 360.
yes. And then I believe the next chapter after that is chapter 19. So technically we're going from chapters 9 through chapters 10 in the interlude.
Correct.
So that will be next week, and we will break down the plot there. If you are enjoying us so far, please make sure that you are rating, reviewing, and subscribing. That is a great way to give us a little bit of a boost. And please join us over on many of our social medias. We are mostly on Blue Sky and Instagram. We do updates on formerly known as Twitter, the evil dark place.
Yeah,
As
that
and we are
don't go
also
there.
over on Discord. So please join us on our Discord where we will be chatting about our Breaking Into the Broken Earth trilogy, as well as some of our other previous seasons. If you're interested in any of those, like we said, we did the Wheel of Time.
We
Uh,
also have an email if you want to reach out
oh
too.
yeah, ourpod@gmail.com. Please reach out and let us know, what these books mean to you. These books are pretty important to Laura, and I'm sure I will love them because I'm loving it so far. And this
Yeah,
is a
this
bit
is
of a
one of my favorite series, and I'm very nervous about covering it because I'm like, I need to do this series justice, and I never will because it's so phenomenal.
It is great so far. I'm enjoying my time. It was really easy to sit down and read this, kind of getting me out of a reading slump because these are that good. So please make sure that you're talking with us over at Discord or on our email. That would be very helpful. We'd love to hear from you all.
And thanks for
And
listening today. We
yeah,
really
thank you
appreciate
so
it.
much. And join us next week as we continue to break into the
Break
Broken
the
Earth
earth.
trilogy. All right. Bye.